Now, when we look at the origins of white people and Asians, there are basically two theories. There's a monogenetic theory and a polygenetic theory. Now, the monogenetic theory is basically saying that, it's the out of Africa theory. Everybody came from African people. The Africans gave birth to all races. Then you have the polygenetic theory, which is, of course, different, and there are other races of people involved. Now, the whole thing is, what are these other races? We know that there is a consensus around the world between all scientists that civilization began in Africa. So we're not going to argue that because every scientist agrees that we came from Africa. Everybody did. Whether you want to accept that or not, we all come out of Africa. So let's look at this polygenetic theory. And the whole polygenetic theory involves the Africans in Africa, and then you have the Neanderthals, and you have the Denisovans. Now, scientists are not exactly 100% clear on where the Neanderthals came from. Now, we know Neanderthal bones go back at least 100,000, 200,000 years. We know Homo sapien bones go back at least 400,000 years and further, and Homo erectus go back at least 300,000 years and further as well. Now, they figured that at some point, the Homo erectus made it with Homo sapien and gave rise to Neanderthal, and that the Denisovans is basically inbreeding that took place within the Neanderthals. Now, none of these theories are 100% concrete, but this is what they came up with. Now, when we look at the whole polygenetic theory, there's basically two theories within it that explains where the white race and the Asians came from. Now, one of the theories is that at some point, the Africans left out of Africa, crossed the Red Sea, crossed the Persian Gulf into Iran, and they split up. Now, once they split up, one group went into Europe and became the Neanderthals. The other group went far east and became the Denisovans. This is one of the theories. The second theory is that the Africans left Africa, went into Europe and Asia, and made it with Neanderthals and made it with the Denisovans and gave rise to the white race and the Asian race. Now, what is the problem with this model? The problem with this model is you can't take a black African, I'm talking about a black African, Kunta Kinte looking African, and mate him with this and get this. It's just not possible. There's no way that you can take a black African and mate him with anything and that African's traits not show up. Now understand, no matter how you slice it, whether you want to accept the monogenetic theory or the polygenetic theory, no matter how you look at it, you cannot get the white race or the Asian race without the Africans, period. So this makes the Africans the original man. Or as Dr. Anzac put it at Cornell University,
the Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. No evidence of admixture. So they're the real pure humans. Homo sapiens. Really, really interesting, and it gives you a lot to think about.
So now understand, you can find traces of the Neanderthal DNA in the white race and the Asian race, but not in the African race. There's no trace. There's no evidence of Neanderthals inside of Africans. But again, there's no way you can get this white man or this Asian from a black man mating with this Neanderthal by their definition, by their view of Neanderthal. It's just not possible. It would not look like this. So there has to be another explanation. There has to be something else that we have to look at. Now, when we look at the polygenetic theory and when you look at the other theory of Africans coming out of Africa and turning into the Neanderthals, it makes more sense than Africans coming out of Africa and mating with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. Now, Dr. Andre Mancia and Andres Erickson of Cambridge University tackled this whole thing about the inbreeding between the Neanderthals and the Africans, and this is what they had to say. It says, they began with an ancestral hominin population throughout Africa and Europe. Because of their regional proximity, the hominins in Europe had more genes in common with those of northern Africa than those of southern Africa. Africa and Europe then became genetically isolated from one another, perhaps triggered by changing climates, says Mancia. This allowed the Europeans to evolve into Neanderthals and the Africans to evolve into modern humans. Crucially, though, the modern humans in northern Africa retained genetic similarities with the Neanderthals that the southern Africans lacked. Northern Africans ultimately moved into Europe, but they didn't need to interbreed with the Neanderthals to share some genes in common with them. You cannot prove there was never any hybridization, says Mancia, but none of the evidence for hybridization is convincing. Now, there's something wrong with this model as well. It will also come to the conclusion that everybody is largely in agreement on what I'm going to show you. So understand, Dr. Mancia and Dr. Erickson are basically trying to give us two separate origin stories for the African race and for white people. They are saying that basically there was a separation between the Africans in North Africa and the Europeans in Europe. So these hominins that they are speaking of that was in Northern Africa and in Europe are these things, these ape-looking things. So understand, they are saying that an ice age or some kind of climate change separated them. So the Africans in North Africa stayed there and became the modern humans, and in Europe these hominins became the Neanderthals. Now the problem with this is we already know that Homo sapiens existed hundreds of thousands of years before the Neanderthals, and we know that they began in Africa. So no matter how you want to slice it, you still cannot get the white man without the African, period, point blank.
We will examine documented evidence which suggests that our theory of evolution needs to be completely revised. Much of this evidence has been known for hundreds of years, but it's been ignored because it directly contradicts theories which are universally accepted. In their controversial book, Forbidden Archaeology, Michael Cremo and Dr. Richard Thompson have revealed a major scientific cover-up. Since the beginning of archaeology, researchers have found bones and artifacts showing humans like us existed hundreds of millions of years ago. But according to Thompson, these discoveries have been suppressed, and we have come to accept a picture of prehistory that is largely incorrect.
My co-author and I did 8 years of research. We looked at every archaeological discovery that's ever been made, and what we found is that there are hundreds of such discoveries that indicate human beings like ourselves have been around for literally millions of years.
So now, what is the truth? What is the origin of the white race and of the Asians? Now, if you read the book Civilization and Barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop, now, scientists are in consensus, and most people agree that civilization, that life began in Africa. You're talking about in Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, somewhere near the equator. Now, there are three different directions that people believe that the Africans went, that they went out and they split up. Three different directions. Now, one way is a lot of people believe they crossed into Yemen, crossed the Red Sea into Yemen, then crossed through Saudi Arabia, crossed the Persian Gulf into Iran, and then split up. Another theory is that they went north in Africa and they crossed over through Egypt into, the Middle East and, split up somewhere there. So now in the book Civilization and Barbarism, Sheikh Anta Diop points out that he believes they left through Morocco. They crossed the Straits of Gibraltar into Europe and then they split up there. Some kept going east and some stayed in Europe and, they settled. Now understand, when we follow these Africans, they settle all across Europe into Asia. So we can find them, they set down, they settled, they set up civilizations, but then at some point a group of people got together and they left and they kept populating, they kept spreading across Europe and Asia. So now understand, these Africans who left Africa, who set out across Europe and across Asia, they will later give rise to many civilizations, to many tribes of people. So understand, we're talking about the indigenous people of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and India. The whole Indus Valley civilization. These people come from Africa. So when you look at the Indus Valley civilization, we can find people in India. We can find the Andaman tribe. The Andaman tribe, we can find these people in these areas. So now when we look at these people, we can see that they are clearly Africans. You can clearly see the dark skin. We can clearly see where they originate from. So we're talking about the indigenous people of the Middle East, right here, the Indus Valley people, the Andaman tribe. Now, most of these people were wiped out later by the British. So now, most of the Andaman people are gone. The people who are left are known by a different name. They are called the Sentinelese. Now, these people are the descendants of the Andaman tribe. This is who they became. They are still in existence today. So now, as we keep going further east, as we go into Thailand, we can find the Mani tribe. These are the indigenous people of Thailand. Look at these people. They are clearly from Africa, settling across Europe, across Asia. They populated many places. Look at these people. Look at the afro. Look at the hair. These are clearly African people. This is where your Thai people come from. The proof is here. We don't even have to really do no DNA research. You can look and see for yourself. Look at these people. These are the indigenous people of Thailand. We can look at the Khmer Kingdom in Cambodia. We can look at the Kampa civilization in Vietnam. And we can look at the Malaya civilization in Indonesia. So when you look at the artifacts, when we look at the ruins, we can see that black faces all over the place. We know that Buddha was black. They worshiped Buddha once as a black god. Now, politics have come and changed Buddha into this white pale-faced Buddha. But when you go into the museums in Thailand, you can see the black Buddha. When you look at the hair on the Buddha statue, we can clearly see that that is black hair. Look at the earlobes. We can see that is indicative of African tribes with the earlobes drooping and the big holes in the earlobes. You won't find me any Thai people who have these ears or has that hair except for the indigenous people of Thailand who look like black people. We can see clearly they come from Africa. So now we know that they settled in Thailand. We can go over more towards the east, towards China. They gave rise to the Xia and Shang civilizations. When you look at these people, we can clearly see with these people in China the evidence of African people. Just look at these people. Look at the hair. Look at the facial features. We can see that these people are African people. Now take a look at these people here. These people are the San people in South Africa. They are African people. These people are not in China, but we can clearly see that they resemble Chinese people. We can clearly see the origins of Chinese people come from Africa. So when we go over into Japan and look at the Jomon and the Ainu people being the indigenous people of Japan who have been closely compared to the Andaman tribe of the Indus Valley. They look exactly alike. So we can see clearly in Japan, these people are also of African descent. Look at them. Look at the hair. These people would look like the same people, the San people in South Africa. These are the same people, the same characteristics. These are the indigenous people of Japan as well. Now, if we keep going over to Australia, everybody knows about the Aborigines. Everybody knows they are clearly of African descent. They have blonde hair, a lot of them. They have dark skin. These are African people. And we know how they have been treated in Australia. We're not going to get into all that. But we can clearly see that when we go across Europe, when we go across Asia and look at the indigenous people, that they are clearly of African descent. There's no way around it. The pictures don't lie. The facts don't lie. And these people, in a lot of cases, are still there today. So now let's get into the whole white race. Where did they come from? Now there are also different theories here, and I'm going to go through two different theories. The other theories are too outrageous for me to even talk about. But there are two main theories here. Now one theory is the whole out of Africa theory. Now some people believe that the Africans, when they left Africa and they went north towards Europe, when they went towards Russia and Sweden and places in this area, that they got trapped in the Ice Age. They got trapped in the Ice Age that lasted between 20 and 40,000 years. And during this Ice Age, they lost the pigmentation, they lost the melanin in the skin because they wasn't being exposed to enough sun. They didn't get enough sun so that the melanin can reproduce itself, because melanin needs the sun to reproduce itself and to stay active. And we know without melanin, then you will be basically white. So they believe that this whole transformation happened during the Ice Age, where these black people, these Africans, got trapped and they had to live in caves, and that they didn't see the sun for hundreds of years in some cases, and they didn't get enough sun exposure, and that they somehow mutated or changed into the white race. This is one theory. Now, here's the problem with this whole theory. Human beings, black people, Africans, we are not ectotherms, meaning we have internal heats. We are endotherms. We have internal heat. Now, when we look at ectotherms like reptiles, reptiles, they need to feel the sun on the surface of their skin because they don't have any internal body heat. If they don't get that sun on their skin, they can't really warm up because they don't generate enough body heat. We can basically survive in the cold. Now, when we look at the Eskimos, and they have lived in the cold for thousands of years, and they are basically brown-skinned people, and they never turn white. So a lot of scientists look at it and see that we are endothermic, and that is enough. We generate enough heat to basically protect our melanin. The thing is, when you look around the world, there are many different places that have frigid, cold temperatures where people live, like Eskimos. There are places that only get, a week without snow. It's always constantly snowing, and there are people who live there. And some of these people come outside with no clothes on or minimal clothes, but they never turn white. They stay brown. A lot of these Eskimos have brown skin. They don't lose any real pigmentation in the skin. So, what else is going on? There's something else here. So we can look at this model and see that it has flaws, and that, because we are endothermic, we should be fine. So now, while I'm on the subject of, the cold and cold places, this is going to give me an opportunity to get into the north of Europe, places like Sweden, where I'm at now, and Russia, and Norway, and Finland, and places like this. Who are the indigenous people of these places? And we look at the Sami or the Sami people that are in northern Finland, northern Sweden, northern Russia, northern Norway. These people are the indigenous people of these lands of northern Europe. This is where your Russian people come from, or your Swedish people. These are the indigenous people of this place. And the whole thing is this. When we look at the oldest pictures of the Sami people, they look like this. These people look closer. They look more Mongoloid or more Asian. They look more Asian, like the people we find down in the Indus Valley, like the people we find over in China and the San people. They look more like these people, back in the 1900s. This picture is from the 1900s. This is what they look like. So now what happened was, once the white people came, they started to go into the Sami territory and take over. Not at first. At first, they started to, interbreed in there and live with them, and everything was peaceful. But later on, the late 1800s into the 1900s, they began to take over the lands. They began to invade and wipe out a lot of the indigenous, the original Sami people. So it went from them looking like this to today they look like this. Now, most of these people are a product of breeding with the original Sami people. So you have like a mix between these Mongoloid or these Asian-looking Sami people and the white people, and you produce this. But these people today are protected. Now, for a long time, they've been fighting to get protection because they are almost gone. There's not many of them left that you'll find today that still look Asian. Most of them you'll see today look like this. They look like white people. Now, here in Sweden, we call them like Laplanders. It's called Lapland. Now we have Laplanders in Lapland. They own a whole lot of Sweden. They own a whole lot of land here. These people are protected people, and they are well respected by the Swedish people. Now, they protect the Sami people today. Russia protects them. Finland protects them. Sweden. Everybody got together and they protect these people today. Well, they have to because they're almost gone. And you have this, this mixture of this white man and the indigenous original people of northern Sweden and Russia today. They are all protected today. But this is where these people come from. Now we can look at these people back then and we can trace them back to Africa and see that originally these people were black people, just like in China, just like in Asia, and they come from Africa. Now, the second theory is the one that most scientists agree with today. They didn't always agree with this theory because of racism and politics. So now, the thing is, some scholars believe that when the Africans left Africa and headed to northern Europe, headed towards these areas like Finland and stuff like that, that they did get trapped in this ice age, but they did not immediately turn white. After years and years of non-exposure to the sun and exposure to the frigid temperature, they didn't immediately turn white. That at some point, genetic deficiency was produced, and it was produced in everybody who had to live through this ice age. Everybody who survived in it, that was in this area, in these really cold, frigid climates, that this disease or this I'm not going to call it a disease. Let's just call it this gene was produced, and it changed people. Now, this gene is basically called OCA1 and OCA2. It's oculocutaneous albinism. Albinism 1, albinism 2, oculocutaneous. Now, we can see that albinism exists in animals. Everybody have seen albino crocodiles or albino gorillas. Albino tigers, it's albino animals all over the place. But we know completely well that we have albino humans. Now, this is going to be hard for a lot of people to accept, but it's the one that fits and it makes the most sense, and science backs it up, and we're going to go through it. So now, oculocutaneous 1 is a severe case of albinism. Now, its prototypical traits are basically white skin, blonde hair, and gray eyes. Now, in severe cases, the eyesight could become diminished or the person could become blind with OCA1. Now, oculocutaneous 2 is the more common form of albinism, and its prototypical traits are blonde hair or red hair, blue eyes or green eyes or gray eyes. Where do we find these traits at? We find them in white people. But here is the kicker. Albinism, oculocutaneous 2, oculocutaneous 1 is found in every single race of people on the face of the earth. That is the kicker. Why is that the kicker? Because we can trace it all the way back to African people. So this is proof positive that this is the source. It is hereditary. And the fact that these Africans in this area who have albinism, who have OCA1 and OCA2, the fact that these people have never left Africa, they have never been out in the world and seen and experienced the rest of the world. A lot of these tribes have never left. They have always been here. So how could they affect the rest of the world? Now, this is the Bahati tribe in Pakistan. Have you ever seen an albino Pakistani? Here you go. Look at the hair. You have red hair. You have blonde hair. These people are everywhere. This is albinism. This is where this white race comes from. But understand, OCA1 and OCA2 is caused by a defect or a deficit in the production of melanin and the absence of pigmentation in the skin. So now think about nature. Nature gives you what you need. Nature does not make mistakes. So why is it that black people have so much melanin? Why are we so dark? Because we were created in Africa, and Africa is hot and the sun is highly exposed there. So nature says that, okay, I have to give you something to protect you from this sun. Thus, melanin. This is why we have so much of it. So now let's take this thing back to nature. Let's think about the people that got trapped in this ice age. Think about when a woman became pregnant. Now, when a woman gives birth, this is nature at work. This is a natural event. This is the work of the creator or the work of God. Now, what did the ancient Egyptians call God? They call them Neterus, or they call them Netchers. This is where we get the word nature, because they believe that the woman was God. That's why we call it Mother Nature. So now, you cannot get a man from a man. You can't get a woman from a man, but you can get a man and a woman from a woman, because the woman is the creator. This is why they believe that the black woman was God, because the black woman, being the original woman, would be the original God. So now, let's look at nature here. Let's think about nature. Forget all the bull. Nature is saying, wait a minute. We are not in Africa no more. It's not hot here. So we have to conform to this atmosphere, to this temperature, to this climate. So nature is saying with this baby in the womb that we need to change. So now nature's saying we don't need this kinky hair. We need longer hair. We need hair to protect our ears from the cold, to protect our face and neck. We don't need this broad nose. We need a thinner nose because we don't want to be inhaling all this cold air going to the brain. We don't need thick lips. We don't need the skin complexion. We don't need all this melanin because there's not so much sun here that's going to damage us. This is nature. Nature made this change, and in doing so, it created OCA1 and OCA2. Oculocutaneous 1 is a severe case of albinism. Oculocutaneous 2, or OCA2, is the more common form of albinism. But just like in genetics, when you trace something back to patient 0 will basically have different traits of this disease or this, mutation. You'll be able to find something different inside patient 0 that will point to patient 0 being the initial carrier or the originator of this specific mutation or disease. So I told you about OCA1 and OCA2, but there exists OCA3 and OCA4. OCA4 can be found in Japanese people as well, but that's about it. But OCA3 is only found in African people. So if the African race is not the father and the mother, then every other race could not have oculocutaneous. And because they are the father and mother, we can see that the genetics inside them is different and capable of producing OCA3 and OCA4. And no other race is able to produce OCA3 except for African people. Yet, every single race is affected by OCA. This proves, whether you want to accept it or not, that they are patient 0. They are the father and the mother Africans. So now the difference with OCA3, which only affects African people, is they have reddish brown skin, or they have ginger or red hair, and they have brown or hazel irises. And this is how you can tell who has OCA3 specifically, because they'll have like white skin with like these brown or reddish freckles. This is where your freckles come from. When you see that red freckles all over the albino skin or in white people's skin, it produces these freckles. Now, what else can we see that has the same kind of characteristics as OCA1 or oculocutaneous 1, 2, 3, 4? That's vitiligo. We see vitiligo every single day. People see it all the time. And it's the same symptoms as OCA 1, 2, 3, 4. It's vitiligo, except that oculocutaneous happens within the womb. You are born albino. Vitiligo happens when you come out black and you start to turn white. Now, this is proof positive. I mean, come on. Put everything aside. Put all the hate aside and witness the truth. You can see it for yourself. Look at these people. Look at the skin. You can't tell me this didn't come from this. Look at them. Half black, half white. Spots of white all over them. Look at these people. This is where your white race comes from. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, wait a minute. They don't look exactly like white people. They look a lot more paler. Now, we have all seen some super pale people out there, and you can't seriously tell a difference when you look at these pale people who are considered white people and these people who are considered albinos. But understand this was thousands of years ago. So understand, once these albinos started to mate with black people, so what's going to happen when an albino mates with a black person? They get together, they have a baby, they're going to produce a light baby, but that baby's going to have a little bit of darkness to it. It's going to be brown or really light brown. Now, what if this now light brown or mixed baby has a baby by another albino? How's that baby going to turn out? That baby is going to look more lighter. And what if that baby has a baby with another albino? Then that baby's going to come out white, but have some kind of darkness to it. It's going to give you the features that these white people possess today. So understand, you can have white people in your genes or white blood in your blood right now today and look as dark as me. Because let's say your great whoever grandfather had a baby with a white woman or a white man. So they had a baby, that baby came out light. Now, if that baby keeps producing black or mating with black all the way up to you, you will not find a trace of whiteness in you. You won't be able to see it. It probably will not show up. You will look as dark as me, but down the line, you could have a, super white great grandmother or grandfather. It's the same thing vice versa. If a black person and a white person have a baby and that baby comes out light, but then that light baby, mates with a white person, and then they'll have a lighter baby. And then that baby grows up, mates with another white person, so on and so forth. The result will be eventually just this white man. No traits or no characteristics, or I shouldn't say characteristics, but no signs that it's some black in that DNA somewhere, because it has been bombarded with all of this, albinism, and it kind of covers up and, knocks out the black DNA because you have so many traces of DNA from albinos or from white people. The little subtle difference from an albino to a white person can appear. It's just genetics. It's just how things come to be. It's nature. But look at the pictures. Look, you can't tell if some of these people are albino as we consider them or just regular white people as we consider them. Just look at them. This is proof right here. Look at the pictures. Look at these people. You see it all the time. You cannot tell a difference. They have red lips, just like white people have red lips. They produce the same color. Now the thing is, albino, when it mates with albino, will only produce albino. White and white will only make white. So now you also have to take into account, the race mixing that would happen during exploration. When these groups and when these tribes was getting up and they was, going across the lands, and when they was just going out to find food, and they was, just going out exploring, they would run into all kinds of people. You have the albino Komi people. You have those people that's in the Nordic area. You also have the Samoyed people that's in Siberia, in northern Russia. The Samoyed people, that's what the dog is named after. The Sami people who I was talking about earlier. Then you have the Dravidian people, the people who speak the Dravidian language, who will also be producing albinos. I mean, it's just so many different races of people producing people, albino people. And these albinos would meet at some point and come together. And when an albino has an albino, you're going to get another albino. But you have to think about the difference that let's say a Dravidian albino and a Samoyed albino, when they come together, what they would produce versus, an African albino and let's just say a Sami, one of the Sami people, one of the albinos from those tribes. So it's so many different ways you can put this stuff together. We got to think about thousands and thousands of years of people bumping into each other and, running into different tribes during exploration that's going to produce all different kinds of people. They felt different and maybe they formed different tribes, which they did. And they came together in different groups, I should say. So then you have like albinos with red hair, albinos with white hair. I mean, you can just look at the situation back then and think. So some of these people in different tribes, it's sad to say, probably was not, looked at, favorably. They probably was shunned away. And they probably end up, as they got older, just trying to find people who look like them and wanting to be around each other. So this is some of the things we got to look at so many different races producing albino people. But the originator, you have to understand, is the African. So as I was saying, how nature basically produces conducive to its environment. So you would think that Aculocuteneans would be different based on the part of the world that you live in. So we know, for instance, that people in Ireland have red hair. People in Europe or Europeans, blonde hair, blue eyes. So you have to think that the original Africans that started out in Ireland and in Europe, once they start having albino babies with, red hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, then think about the people in the Nordic that look like more Asian, more Mongoloid. So these people, when they came down and started to mate with these now albino red hair or albino white, blonde hair, blue eyes, they will produce a different type of, person or white person. They will look different. So when we look at the Nanette people or the Samoyed people of today, we can see that today they look more Caucasian, they look more white. But we know that at some point you had albinos mating with the indigenous people of the Samoyed tribe who look more Mongoloid or more Asian. So when you look at the skull type of the Samoyed people and Nanette people of today, we can see they have more of a wider face and flat face, more than you would see a typical Caucasian. Now the whole thing is, when you look at an Asian skull, which is also known as brachycephalic skulls are flat. Caucasians or white people, they have dolichocephalic skulls, which is more flat, but at the same time narrow in the middle. So if you take a Caucasian skull and you put it face down on a table, it will probably rock back and forth. If you take a brachycephalic skull or an Asian skull, it would probably lay flat down. And we know African skulls, we protrude from the mouth area a little bit commonly. So if you lay it flat down, then the bottom will lift up a little bit. But the thing is, Africans can produce all three skull shapes. We're talking dolichocephalic, brachycephalic, and Africoid. African or Negroid, as some white people would say. We produce all three skulls. So this is another thing that we can trace back and showing that everybody comes from black people and people with dark skin. You can find brown skin, black people, African Americans all over the world who fit these facial features of brachycephalic and dolichocephalic. Classifying these skull shapes and trying to separate them and put them in different groups is just another racist tactic. Now, I'm not leaving out my Hispanic people, all of my Mexicans and everybody like that, the other races of the world. Understand that you are some form of, African, Caucasian, and Asian. You are some mix of that. This is how you get your, Hispanic or Latino people and your Mexicans, some kind of variation. I mean, you can look at Hawaiian people and see that they have a little bit of Asian looking in them. Same thing with your Panamanian people, people down in Panama. You can look at these people and see they look a little more Asian. So we can see where these people come from. So don't think I'm forgetting you. Everybody is some kind of mixture of basically albino, African, and what we would call brachycephalic people or Asian people, who all come from African people. Plain and simple, no matter how you slice it, African is the origin. This is where we all come from. Now, all this research was blown out of the water anyway. All this digging into, who was here first, was it black people or white people? All this stuff was blown out of the water in 1974 when they found AL288-1, which is the Lucy bones. And the Lucy bones go back to over 3 million years old. And it's the bones of a woman found in Ethiopia, believed to be of the Twa or the Pygmy tribe. Now, when we look at the Twa people, they are a small people. Look at them. They have a small stature. The men, the grown looking men, but small bodies. A lot of people believe that they are the oldest people on the planet or come from the oldest people on the planet. Now, we know about the ancient Egyptians, talk about the Twa a lot. We know about goddess, god Bes, who people believe was a Twa. They are all over the place. There are still statues of these people in ancient Egypt. So either they lived for a very long time or, a lot of them was probably wiped out. But Of course, today, we can still find the Pygmy or the Twa people today in Africa, and a lot of people go and visit them. They are very nice people. They look slightly different from, the hieroglyphics that we see in ancient Egypt. So we don't know if it's a different species of Twa or a different race of Twa, which is why I say they probably was wiped out, the race that we see in the hieroglyphics, because they look a little bit different. But these people go back millions of years. They come out of Africa. So it's not much more that we can show to prove who the original man is. You can't find a skeletal remain. You can't find the body of anybody that goes back further that traces to another race. Period, point blank. Everybody goes back to Africa. Now understand this. This is something that a lot of people don't realize either. We can go into every race of people and find an indigenous people, an indigenous population, except for one, and that's the white people. So if you go into Africa, guess what? You're going to find African people running around butt naked or half naked, just like they used to back in ancient days. Same thing in India, same thing in China, same thing in Japan, same thing in South America. All these people run around just as the indigenous people did. So we can find the indigenous people of all these other races except white people. The ancient Egyptians shared knowledge before it was taken from them. They were sharing the information, saying, hey, this is what you should know. Philosophy, mathematics, science, all that stuff came from African people, from the ancient Egyptians, before it was taken from us. So we want to point this stuff out and let people know and recognize the truth. That's it. So we can all live comfortably. Plain and simple.